Yes, hello folks, welcome to our weekly global football show. I'm your host as always, Fab Brand, joined with the excellent Zach Lowe. Way too talented to be doing podcasts with me as he knows this, so I'm going to enjoy his presence while I have him. How you doing, young man?
Hey Phil, doing very well. Very excited to be co-hosting yet another global football show. Just want to have a quick shout out. As you know, my website Breaking the Lines, that's BTL Vid on Twitter. We have actually done two lengthy threads today. One on the latest action in the Brasileirão. A lot of
I
interesting
was
games
watching
going
that, yeah, I
on
was reading it.
in the Brazilian top flight, and actually we've been doing weekly recaps of every single match day in the Brasileirão season. So definitely read that if you need a crash course and want to learn about players like Vitor Roque and Endrick. And we also did a very lengthy thread on the feud concerning Greg Berhalter, Giovanni Reina, Daniel Reina, and the blackmailing saga that really poisoned the U.S.'s World Cup campaign. One of the,
Sure.
quite frankly, one of the most bizarre stories I've seen as of late. So yeah, definitely check both of those out.
Yeah, definitely check it out. I was actually reading a little bit about that before we come on the air, about another 17-year-old debutant at Santos, which is quite interesting, so definitely give that a check. And you mentioned something there about Greg Berhalter, which is really interesting because anybody that's been involved in club soccer in the US will have looked at this and said it's quite amazing that this happens at the very highest level. It happens at all levels of football, where you get parents that aren't happy about their kids playing time and starting fights with coaches. Doesn't matter what level you play at, it happens to all of us. Lots to talk about today, mate. Of course, as we go on, our Pochettino has agreed a deal to go to Chelsea in the summer. I want to ask you about that. What to expect from Pochettino, who we might bring in, who we might let go, whether it's even possible to do the job that he's being brought in to do. I want to ask you about Feyenoord, of course, who won the Eredivisie this weekend. First time since 2017. Santiago Jimenez has been quite incredible for them. Arne Slot has done a fantastic job since taking over from Dick Advocat. I want to talk to you a little bit about Arsenal. Interested in some of the narratives that are going on about their season. We'll talk a little bit about that. And one or two other things as well. We'll also have Jonathan Johnson on the podcast tomorrow, so we'll leave most of the French PSG stuff, the Toulouse story, which is quite incredible. Of course, we'll talk about what happened there with some players refusing to play over a tribute to the LGBTQ community. We'll talk a little bit about obviously the drama at PSG with Lionel Messi, possibly going back to Barcelona, and possibly Jose Mourinho going to PSG. He's had a poor end of season run at Roma, haven't won in the last five. So let's talk about that tomorrow. So do tune in for that. Mate, first and foremost, I want to start with you with Pochettino because he has just been announced that he'll come to Chelsea in the summer. Not a massive surprise, as of course, has been on the cards for quite a while. But it seems to me that for Pochettino, it's always helpful to have someone like Graham Potter go before you because if Chelsea don't know why Graham Potter failed, I think Pochettino will. And Pochettino's a very smart guy. I remember towards the end of his Tottenham tenure, there was some issues about how he had said he was essentially a coach and he wasn't a manager because he had no control over recruitment. And I didn't take that as a compliment, I took it as a dig towards Daniel Levy and the football club and the way it's being run. It's hard for me to imagine that it'll be anything different. Chelsea, I was listening to an interview with David Ornstein before we come on this podcast. David Ornstein said that Chelsea's recruitment plans haven't changed this summer based on this appointment. There'll be collaboration between Pochettino, Paul Winstanley, Lawrence Stewart, who are the sporting directors at Chelsea, and of course Frank Lampard. Collaboration doesn't, it's quite a vague word. I mean, there was allegedly collaboration between Ralph Rangnick on United future plans, and I don't really think that happened. He's walking into a bit of a mess. And I understand he won't be at games between now and the end of the season. What do you expect from Pochettino at Chelsea?
Yeah, so overall, I like this move. I think that given the fact that when you look at the other options, I think that Julian Nagelsmann immediately withdrew his candidacy from the Chelsea position, and as well as Luis Enrique, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that there weren't too many options who are going to be who are going to be checking all the boxes, shall we say. But I think that Pochettino definitely meets a lot of that criteria. And I think that, when you rewind the clock back to the summer of 2014, when Mauricio Pochettino took charge of Tottenham, I think that there are actually a lot of similarities between that situation and the current predicament that Chelsea currently find themselves in, because Tottenham at that time, they had sold Gareth Bale the previous summer, spent a ton of money to little avail, and were quite frankly at rock bottom at that point. And I think that Chelsea, with regards to this situation, the expectations and the standards right now, they are very low because of what we've just seen. This is quite frankly the worst campaign I can recall from any top six club in the Premier League. So the fact is, Pochettino is taking charge of a Chelsea team that, yes, has spent a lot, but that really doesn't quite have its spine together, and they are lacking in several key positions. So I think that his success is definitely going to depend a lot on recruitment. I think that's definitely going to be one of the biggest keys. And Chelsea, when I look at their squad, they definitely need a goalkeeper. They need a center forward. They need a defensive midfielder, and I think they need to move on from quite a few players such as Mateo Kovacic and Golo Kante, and try to rebuild on more of a younger side. And I think that also not playing in European competition could be a blessing in disguise, because it's definitely going to incentivize them to try to offload some of these players and try to really build up this team. So yeah, I think that Pochettino, the fact is, he did a fantastic job at Tottenham despite failing to win the Premier League. You look at where they were when he took charge, and you look at where he left them, challenging for the title on two separate occasions, reaching the Champions League final, and above all, maximizing so many key players. I think that's definitely an underlooked part of Pochettino's time, both at Tottenham as well as St. Mary's, the fact that he was able to develop a lot of these up-and-coming young players, such as Kyle Walker, Harry Kane, Heung-min Son, getting the most out of them. And I think that with regards to Chelsea, you are certainly seeing a lot of talented players being underutilized, such as Enzo Fernandez. So I think that it does have the makings of a decent spine. I look at this team. I think that Wesley Fofana, Benoit Badiashile, Levi Colwill, Reece James. I think there's quality in defense. Enzo, for me, he needs a top quality partner, someone, maybe Joao Paulinho, Declan Rice, not so sure. And I also think that, there needs to be guarantees in attack, because right now I look at that front line and there aren't that many difference makers. Yes, you've got Raheem Sterling, who recently got a brace against Nottingham Forest. Yes, you've got Kai Havertz and Noni Madueke, who've shown their talent on occasion, but are they going to be able to do it on a consistent basis?
With Nkunku coming in this summer too, don't they?
Yeah, and I like Christopher Nkunku a lot. He recently got himself a brace of assists to lead Leipzig to a win against Werder.
Yeah, I watched him a weekend.
So I think I find it hard to see Chelsea bringing in Nkunku as well as negotiating a permanent deal for Joao Felix. But with that being said, with missing out on European football, are they in a position to turn their nose up at a player of Felix's potential? It's going to be a very interesting question, because I think that there's a potential for, shall we say, a square peg in a round hole with Felix. But with that being said, I do think that he has shown a lot of promise here. He needs to be able to adapt to Pochettino's system, but I could certainly see him playing, shall we say, a Dele Alli role, that second striker role behind whoever that is, Harry Kane or someone else. So yeah, I think that there's definitely, I think that Harry Kane is probably not a great option, but considering the fact that Daniel Levy's not going to let him go, but I could see maybe someone like Victor Osimhen or Randal Kolo Muani. The fact is, I think that is Chelsea's biggest concern for me. I think that going into next season with Kai Havertz as well as I guess Armando Broja and David Datro Fofana. For me, it's just a little bit too risky. I think that when you're looking at their team, they are definitely missing a clear cut goal getter, a center forward such as Ollie Watkins, such as Ivan Toney, all these other players that are ahead of Chelsea. They have that player, whether that's Alexander Mitrovic, Gabriel Jesus, Harry Kane. You know, Chelsea they 100% need a center forward that they can build upon.
Yeah, they aren't alone in that. Pochettino for me is probably the only manager in recent memory that left Tottenham with an enhanced reputation than what he went there with, and I'm sure he will learn from the PSG experience. And to me, the reason why Pochettino left Spurs with an enhanced reputation is because his profile fits exactly who Spurs are as a football club. He's a brilliant coach. He works with young players, he develops them, and that's what Tottenham are. Chelsea, on the other hand, are more PSG than they are Tottenham. And I'm looking at Chelsea going, can they get out of their own way? Can they turn around and surrender to a Pochettino and his identity and say, okay, we're not going to try to go out and sign players to the top of the market. We're going to sign developmental players and give complete autonomy to Maurizio Pochettino, which you will need to do. He's bringing in all his backroom staff, and you'll have to listen to football people if you want to get results on the field. And that's the only thing I would be concerned about if I was a Chelsea fan, as to whether they will adhere to that over the long term. It might be something they promised in the beginning, but we know how these people work, and eventually, because I don't think Pochettino will win the league in his first season. I don't think he's gonna. So there'll be reasons to doubt him, and when they doubt him, is that when they revert the type and start saying, well, you know what, we need to do it our way. And for Pochettino, I hope he's got the concessions that he needs. Otherwise, he's just going to be another reputation manager who's sacrificing his reputation for someone else's failures.
One thing I will say, Phil, I mean, you make a great point that out of all these guys, such as Mourinho, Nuno, Conte, Pochettino is really the only Tottenham manager of the past decade that's left the club with a better reputation than before. With regards to Paris Saint-Germain, though, I can't think of too many managers who have improved their reputation. Even Thomas Tuchel, who led them to a Champions League final. So I think that he will have learned from his mistakes at Paris Saint-Germain in terms of managing these egos, in terms of dealing with superstars. Although I must say, I look at this Chelsea team and I wonder, who are the superstars? I'm not so sure he'll have quite the same problems, although, of course, there are the added pressures of dealing with so much investment and the expectations that this club has created for itself. But what I will say is I think that Pochettino is a very good floor raiser. He's somebody who's going to take this Chelsea team that has no direction whatsoever at the moment, on or off the pitch, and that's going to help build an identity for them. And that's been a real big problem for them at Stamford Bridge lately, and that's something that emanates from having so much managerial turnover. You don't really have a manager who's going to have a consistent form of recruitment and who's going to be able to implement his style and philosophy. But if he's going to be given that same time and patience that he was handed at Tottenham, I think that we could see Chelsea really start to finally find a sense of consistency under Todd Boehly. It's going to take time, even if they manage to get in the likes of Mike Maignan and Victor Osimhen and Declan Rice this summer. It's going to take time to merge these players, especially when you look at the fact that Manchester City, as well as so many other clubs, are quite frankly ahead of them at the moment. But I do think that they have the talent to bounce back and of course exploit their lack of European commitments and get back into the top four if they can get these signings right. But I do think that in the back of Boehly's mind, he recognizes that Pochettino is somebody who may not be tasked to finish off the job, but he is going to help get the building blocks in place. Okay, so maybe he's not somebody who's going to win you that third Champions League. He's not a Zinedine Zidane or Carlo Ancelotti proven winner type, but he has certainly done a very good job in terms of player development, in terms of in terms of getting results. And I do think that he is the best choice for Chelsea when I look at their players, and I look at the fact that despite the fact that there isn't really that spine in place, you can see a lot of talent, such as Enzo, James, Fofana. So I do think that this is the right choice. But with that being said, I'm not 100% sure if he's going to be the right man to get them to the promised land. It remains to be
Yeah,
seen.
so that's my question.
Yeah.
Because if you're Pochettino's agent and you're sitting in a meeting with Todd Bowley and Benedict Bally and saying, hire my client, how would you sell Pochettino to Chelsea on what? What are his
How would I
attributes?
how would I sell him on what exactly?
So what if you said, sell me your client, what is Pochettino's most outstanding attributes that separate him from everyone else?
So okay, I would say the fact that he
That
was
make
able.
him right for Chelsea.
So look, he did a good job at Southampton. I think
Good
he
job
did
at Southampton. Does that
a
get you a
good job.
Chelsea job?
And he did a fantastic job at Tottenham.
What
Okay,
did he
I
win?
don't care that he didn't win a trophy. The fact
Okay.
is, without Pochettino, Tottenham would never be anywhere close to challenging for the league title in back-to-back years or reaching the Champions League final. Okay, and I mean, yes, it is embarrassing that he is like I don't know, 50, 51, and has no real major trophies. But the fact is, one thing that some things that these technical directors and scouts look at is, okay, you may not have the Champions League or the World Cup in your resume, but you have gotten the most out of a lot of these players and have helped really take their games up to another level. We've seen that a lot at Tottenham, not as much at Paris Saint-Germain when you're dealing with a lot of finished products, shall we say, players who are not as malleable, who are not going to be really shifting in their development. But I think that player development, as well as just implementing a good identity. Of course,
You just described Sam Allardyce.
I'm contradicting myself a little bit because there was absolutely no identity whatsoever at Paris Saint-Germain. But how much of that is down to Pochettino? How much of that is down to that club just being so toxic? So look, the fact is, I think it's a good move for all parties. Pochettino has been out of the job since last summer, right? And that's a pretty long time for a manager of his credentials. And I think that you laugh at me, obviously, but look, I
No, I
well,
just haven't heard you say anything that I couldn't describe to an average manager.
okay, look, let's
Because
not
I'm asking the same question. When
let's not make
Pochettino
this
was linked to
personal.
United, I'm like, why? What separates him? He's a likable guy,
Yeah,
right? I know why he succeeded at Spurs because he has. And when I say succeeded, he didn't win anything, but he got Spurs to the Champions League final. I
yep.
mean, which I think is overachieving with Spurs. I don't think you can realistically expect any more than that at Tottenham.
Dude, Tottenham. I
But
mean,
here,
the fact that Tottenham have been a top four regular for what the
yeah,
past years, like,
but Harry Redknapp did
yeah,
that,
for
Zach.
granted, that does not happen without Pochettino.
But
He
Harry Redknapp did that, Zach.
What's up?
Harry Redknapp got them in the Champions League.
Okay,
You know,
shout out to
I'm no, but I'm just saying, like, I like him, right? I do. But here's would be my concern. You need a resume to get you through the bad times. Okay, when things start going south, when you have a couple of bad results, what do you lean on? You lean on
Yeah.
your resume, right? I did this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've won things that you've won, I've won the top trophies. That's what gets players respect. All your methods and everything else too, right?
Yeah.
But when you're looking at a guy that's never done that doesn't have that track record, they are really easy to lose faith in and throw under the bus because it's very easy to say all of a sudden the negatives start appearing when you have doubts. Like, well, he hasn't won anything. That will become amplified. Well, you know what? David Ornstein said that when he left Spurs, the reason why they didn't want to bring him back is because there was a lot of things that happened behind the scenes that people haven't talked about. You look at some of the other jobs that he's done. He's done okay with clubs who don't have an expectation of being serial winners.
Yeah.
Right? Has he ever been really at a club where he's churned out trophy after trophy? You could argue that Mourinho has a much better resume, but maybe he's not a better coach. And when you're at Chelsea, I would worry for Pochettino. I had the same concerns at United. That when you have a culture inside a football club that's rancid, that constantly blames the manager for things, it's going to be easy to blame Pochettino when things go wrong.
Look, here's what I will say. I think that footballing management is often like an iceberg. We often see just a tiny bit of it, but there's often so much deeper that goes in. So I think that there are so many factors to the Pochettino appointment that need to go right in order for him to have success. I think that he needs the right players, but I think that it's about forming an identity as well as forming a new culture. I think that Chelsea, one of the biggest reasons for this lack of consistency and lack of success, no Premier League titles in 6 years now. I think that one of the biggest reasons has been down to a less than ideal playing culture where players aren't afraid of consequences because of the club's failure to move them on and constantly chopping and changing the manager and knowing that the manager is the one that's culpable. The players aren't. They are not going to be held accountable. And I think that needs to change in order for Chelsea to get back on track because what we've seen over the past 9 months from Chelsea is not just a result of underperforming players, not just a result of not having a world-class center forward. It's the result of this toxic player culture and failing to hold these players accountable and creating a real toxic environment. So some really poor decisions that have been made, but I think that Pochettino can help in reversing that. And yeah, what I will say is I think that he is a floor raiser. I think that he's somebody who's going to be able to do a really good job with this rebuild. Okay, and Chelsea need a rebuild above everything else. They need to they need to find an identity both on and off the pitch, and I think that Pochettino will be helpful for that.
But can they rebuild that? They've been doing that for a year. They need to sell.
I would just say, like I said, it's an iceberg, right? And a lot of times we don't see that. Think of how much success. I don't want to say success because obviously they haven't won a trophy, but success that Tottenham have had in recent years since Pochettino left, thanks to players such as Heung-min Son and Harry Kane, who have been able to take that next step since really finding form for the first time under Pochettino. I think that that there's definitely something to be said about that. And I think that, you bring up a lot of examples. For example, Jose Mourinho. Jose Mourinho took charge of Real Madrid when they were in an incredibly dark spot, when they were consistently getting knocked out of the Champions League in the round of 16, and, got them back to the Champions League semifinals, wasn't able to really lead them to silverware, to La Decima, but he was still able to really improve that competitiveness, that culture. And the first year that he leaves, Real Madrid win La Decima and have won 4 since. So I don't think that obviously Mourinho will not have La Decima on his resume, but I don't think that Real Madrid win it without Mourinho being there for 3 years and the work that he did. Similar thing we are seeing with Brighton. I think it's clear that this Brighton team under Roberto De Zerbi is head and shoulders above any team that we have seen under Graham Potter. But the fact is, are Brighton in this position without the foundations that Potter helped lay at the Amex over the course of a few years? I don't think so. So maybe Pochettino is going to be Chelsea's Potter, and maybe they're going to have to bring in a De Zerbi, maybe De Zerbi himself, in 2027 or whatever, to get the job done. But I do think that Pochettino, he's done a great job at both Tottenham and Saints, and I think that he definitely deserves another crack in management. Will be very interesting to see how he does after his Paris Saint-Germain debacle.
No, look, he definitely deserves another crack. I would agree with that. I just don't know. I felt that Graham Potter It wasn't just the wrong choice for Chelsea, but Chelsea was the wrong choice for him. And I wonder, if that may be the case with Pochettino. Anyway, let's move on. Arsenal. Because I mean, Twitter's probably the worst place to draw a narrative from this because football fans are notoriously cruel to each other. But the assumption is that Arsenal collapsed. Certainly, their form over the last 3 or 4 games has not been great. They were under enormous pressure. You talked about them on this podcast before, about them being a young team. City, to be fair, have been absolutely relentless, and they're very, very difficult. They've won 15 in a row. That makes it extremely difficult when they don't make a mistake. One of those games, of course, was against Arsenal. 2 of them against Arsenal, home and away. And depends, if you'd asked Pochettino to start a season with second have been successful, he certainly would have said yes. They haven't won a trophy, but still I think second's a good season. But I was thinking about this last night, and I'm like, I think for Arsenal, the worst thing that they can do is think that this is a good season. Because if they think, you know what, we did really well, we overperformed, rather than coming away with the attitude that we should have won this league, we need to make sure this doesn't happen next season. We need to make sure we build a team next season that doesn't make these mistakes, that makes sure we're ruthless, that we have the squad depth, we win this. That, to me, is the only attitude to take here. If they come away from the season thinking, you know what, we did great, we overperformed, we finished second, that would be a very dangerous mentality to take in the next season for me.
Yeah, listen, I think that Arsenal have had a positive season. Okay, there's no doubt about that. They have, managed to return to the Champions League after 6 years, I believe, and they've been able to challenge for the Premier League title. Obviously, it is disappointing the fact that I believe no team had ever gone into New Year's with as many points as Arsenal and failed to win the title. The fact that Arsenal have been atop the league for practically the entirety of the season, except for when it really mattered. And of course, they are going to lose out on this title. And part of that is down to how good this City team is, how inevitable they are. And, they really didn't panic that since those back-to-back 1-1 draws against RB Leipzig and Nottingham Forest. They have just been relentless and won pretty much every single league match, as you mentioned, and been relentless in the FA Cup and the Champions League. And when you're facing an opponent like that who's won, 4 of the last 5 league titles, that definitely puts it definitely can damage you mentally, and you feel that no matter what you do, it's not going to be good enough just because of how lethal this City team is. But I think that Arsenal, they can definitely be proud of themselves this season, but there are certainly a lot of lessons that need to be learned from these mistakes these past few weeks. Losing the league to City, there's no shame in that, but losing the league in the manner that they have done, there is quite a lot of shame in that. I'm sorry. When you look at their performances, when you look at the results over the past few weeks, yes, it has to be said, Arsenal have bottled it. You look at bottling those leads and drawing to the likes of West Ham, Liverpool, Southampton, and losing to opponents that they quite frankly should be beating. And once again, having their season collapse against Brighton, facing off against Brighton at home, and not just losing 3-0, but being completely dominated from start to finish, both, in terms of possession as well as being first to loose balls and just being completely outplayed, outfought, and outran. And I think that there's a lot to that. So look, Mikel Arteta, one of his biggest mistakes was certainly persisting with Rob Holding for as long as he did. The fact is, Rob Holding is a mid-table championship center back, okay? He should be playing for a team like QPR or Millwall, but he should not be playing for Arsenal. And the fact that it took Arteta as long as it did for him to recognize this, I definitely think it speaks lowly of him, and it's definitely something that he needs to rectify. As a manager, you need to be able to tell when a player is not good enough, when they need to be dispatched. and Arteta took far too long to erase him from the lineup and bring in Jakub Kiwior, who was already far outperformed him in his past few games. But it's a bit ironic that Kiwior was only introduced after they lost to Manchester City. So I think that in another sense, it was also a big blow for them to enter the City match where it was a must-win game for them. Having gone in on the back of, I believe, 3 consecutive draws, they needed to win that, and that's never going to be that's never going to be a positive scenario for them, because City are the team that thrives when it's crunch time, when it's the biggest occasions. We've seen that time and time again, such as going down on the final day of last season, coming away with the league title. They just don't crack when the pressure is on, and Arsenal have cracked. They have cracked for quite a few years, and while they have made significant progress this season, the fact is we've seen a team that has crumbled under the pressure, and that wasn't able to keep up, and it's been a very disappointing way for such a promising season to end. So I think that apart from Arteta being too stubborn to drop Holding until it was too late, I think that one of the things that he definitely needs to work on as Arsenal manager is his squad management. I think a lot of people, they erroneously accuse Pep Guardiola of having a massive squad with so many backups. But the fact is, you look at the players that he is utilizing. Yes, you have some fantastic players coming off the bench, such as Julian Alvarez, Phil Foden, but it's actually kind of a thin squad when you look at it numerically. He is not utilizing that many more players than Arteta is. And as a coach, you need to make the most out of your squad. And I think that, yes, of course, Pep has the best squad in the Premier League. He's blessed with world-class players such as Kevin De Bruyne and Erling Haaland. But he has also been able to keep these players, a lot of them superstar players, on their feet and competitive. You can't really predict a Guardiola lineup. He's going to make some changes. He's going to surprise a lot of people. And I think that as a result, it's not only kept these players competitive and making them realize that they need to bring it not just in every single match, but every single training session, and what that does to establish a competitive environment. But I think it's also allowed them to enter this home stretch of the season feeling pretty fit and ready to go. I don't think there are any major injuries for City at the moment. Apart from avoiding these costly injuries at the right time, they're also all these players are fresh and clicking on all cylinders, and I just think that's something that Arteta has been unable to do. We saw it the first few months of the season. Yes, Arsenal were in sensational form, and it looked like they were going to run away with the title. But you were going with pretty much the exact same lineup in every single match. With Aaron Ramsdale in goal, and Ben White, William Saliba, Gabriel Magalhaes, Alexander Zinchenko. It pretty much wrote the lineup pretty much wrote itself. So there wasn't really any rotation, and I do think that. Quite frankly, Arteta has he definitely needs to work on that aspect of his management, because players such as Reece Nelson, who I think has actually done really well as of late and has made a consistent impact off the bench, he'll be kicking himself that he hasn't been able to get a full run in the team. Because as good as Bukayo Saka has been over the course of the season, the fact is he's really dropped off in form over these past few weeks, and he's far from the only one. And maybe some of these players are feeling the effects of fatigue, but maybe they're also too comfortable in the starting spot, because I think that Nelson is far from the only one. I think that Trossard and a few others, they'll definitely be feeling, what do I need to do in order to get a full run of starts? So yeah, I think that this is definitely a positive campaign at the Emirates. But with that being said, one of the most important things in football is being able to learn from your mistakes, learn what you did wrong. And 100%, I think that Arteta does need to learn how to make the most of a squad, how to keep his players fresh for all competitions, and how to be able to maintain that competitive environment. I think you're on mute, Phil.
I'm sorry. It is quite interesting that Pep Guardiola can keep these players so fit and so fresh. Bayern Munich doctor, of course, is someone that made some interesting questions about Pep Guardiola. Pep Guardiola himself, who failed a non-own test, if I'm correct in saying, who is also managing a City team being charged for the second time with a litany of charges related to cheating. Pep Guardiola, who managed Barcelona, who's also facing allegations of cheating. Without a doubt, Pep Guardiola is an exceptional football manager, knows the game inside out. But I think it's really unfair to Arsenal, and to anyone else for that matter, to not have an asterisk beside Manchester City and their dominance, and to say that Manchester City, who are going for their fourth or fifth title,
Fifth
who are
title
also,
in 6
yeah,
years.
fifth title. Manchester City going for their fifth title in 6 years, who are also facing over 100 charges for cheating by the Premier League, who weren't exculpated, by the way, by CAS, like their fans like to quite rightly say. What they said was that they were unable to prove beyond a reasonable doubt the allegations. That does not exculpate you. It just means that the evidence doesn't exist to justify prosecution of the charges. However, a lot of charges did stand. They refused to comply with an investigation, which is not usually something you would do if you had nothing to hide. I think there's an implied guilt in that. Of course, they paid the fine. And whether you agree with the FFP or not, and whether you agree with the sentiments around FFP or not, it's not really the point. The point is that he signed up for these rules, and these are the same rules that everyone else has to adhere to. So I think, I've made this analogy before. It's a bit like finishing second to Ben Johnson in the Olympics. When you've got someone that's not competing in the same way that everyone else is, that's doping. I think it is quite appropriate to say these have not been. The City have not been emancipated or exculpated from these charges yet, and Arsenal, who aren't, who are complying with the rules, who are doing what everyone else is doing, and spending appropriately and trying to do this organically. We're trying to compete with someone that cut every single corner that didn't want to do that, and that's So to me, I think the fact that. You mentioned something there that I thought was quite interesting about this is the first time a team with Arsenal's points total in January have not won the league, but we're not talking about, this is not analogous to previous years, because now we're talking about teams with completely different resources. And, we're talking about teams that weren't competing in the way they were competing before. There was much more competitive balance. And we don't even know, because there's a lot of payments were allegedly hidden by City, and a lot of FFPs related to compensation of payment. So there's allegedly people that have been compensated significantly, but that hasn't been declared. Now, Rangers Football Club went bankrupt due to EBTs, due to essentially hiding financial payments to players, and they went bankrupt over taxes, but it was cheating without a shadow of a doubt. Celtic couldn't compete with that, and there was payments being hidden, the proper taxes weren't paid on it, and Rangers essentially went out of business over this. Manchester City won't go out of business over it, but I think when we're comparing Mikel Arteta and Arsenal to a football club that's very possible not complying with the rules, I think we have to be fair to Mikel Arteta whenever we're saying his team folded, or this happened, or this happened, or this happened, or this happened. Merit matters in sport, and how you win matters in sport. And to me, I think the fact that Arsenal pushed City so close, and in any other season, Arsenal would probably go on to win the league. But when you have someone, with these types of resources, and are a football club that's not commensurate with anything that they were pre Abu Dhabi. Then it's exactly the same with Newcastle. I mean, pre-Newcastle, pre-City ownership at Newcastle, they were on the verge of getting relegated. Now they're in third. So there's an undeniable correlation between the investment that they're getting and their success. You can fail with money, but you can't succeed without it. And I think it's fair to say that it's really important for journalists when they're talking about City's success to put that caveat in there. Now, it'll drive City fans nuts. I don't really care, and I understand I'm primed to do that as a United fan. But I think it's really, really unfair to not mention the fact that they're once again being charged after a long investigation, by the way, with over 100 charges of cheating.
No, I don't disagree with anything you said. I mean, you make a great point. Uh, there should be that asterisk. I mean, this is a fact that City have really been able to have an unfair advantage over a lot of other teams. But with that being said, this is the reality. The reality is that City have essentially become what Paris Saint Germain is to Ligue 1. They've been able to dominate this league, and that's what Arsenal are going to be chasing for the next few years. And I think they're going to continue to chase it because they have a very strong spine, a very strong few building blocks. When you look at like Bukayo Saka, Gabriel Martinelli, Martin Odegaard in attack, Gabriel Magalhaes and William Saliba in defense. I think they need a lot of investment in the midfield areas, but it's definitely a very promising side. But what I would just say is I do think that it's clear that Arsenal, a lot of their success has been learning from City and bringing in, of course, two key players in Gabriel Jesus and Alexander Zinchenko that, while they may never have been guaranteed starters, definitely played a role in their success. And I think that one thing that they can also take is their being able to utilize the entire squad. But of course, they are going up against Goliath here. It's a
Of course.
near impossible task.
Yeah.
But one thing I will also say is, Liverpool before they ended City's dominance, they were able to beat them on several occasions and be able to contest them directly. And that's what Arsenal needs to be able to do. They've been, shall I say, scared of City. They haven't been able to handle them in a competitive matchup. And I think that they need to be able to do that on a consistent basis because, quite frankly, it's very hard to beat City in terms of consistency. They're a team that, may drop points to a poor side and may have a surprising result, but they're not a team that goes on losing streaks or a streak of 3 straight draws like Arsenal did. So you're probably not going to beat them for consistency, but you need to be able to step up and take your game to them and win on the pitch. That's what Arsenal needs to do. They need to get over that mental hump and prove to themselves that they are capable of fighting and beating this City team. And I think that ever since the William Saliba injury and the poor results that followed in the lead up to that City game, I think that a lot of Arsenal players and Arsenal fans, of course, accepted defeat. They recognized that this title fight was over before the title clincher, and I just think that's what a big thing that Arsenal are missing. They need that confidence in themselves. They need to be able to take their game to City and show that they're not afraid of them.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. My friend, because something that happened this weekend in La Liga was Barcelona won the title. They won it their rivals, Espanyol. And they celebrated on the field, which a result that more or less relegated Espanyol. The Espanyol ultras soon came from the stands, chased them down the tunnel. Both were wrong, in my opinion. I think it was a bit naughty of Barcelona to celebrate on the field. Maybe they could have done that in the changing rooms, the locker rooms, and the outcome was somewhat predictable. I was trying to think of something similar, like if United did that at Anfield, or Liverpool players did that at Old Trafford, or at City, or Arsenal did it at Spurs. I would expect something similar, right or wrong, which probably shouldn't happen, of course, but I thought that was a bit naughty of Barcelona.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that what we saw from Espanyol fans was despicable and has no place in football. For them to invade the pitch, to throw chairs onto the pitch, and force Barcelona players to retreat, and as well as their technical staff. And I do hope that Espanyol face some form of sanctions. I know that they've got two home matches and two away matches coming up in their relegation battle. So I would hope that there's some form of punishment for them. But with that being said, you cannot deny that Barcelona players did provoke it by celebrating in the center circle of their stadium, of their crosstown rivals. And I also think that Xavi was one of the few that did not take part. He went to the dressing room, from what I heard, and he was not part of the celebrations in the center circle. So yeah, when you do kind of ring around the rosy in the center of your rival stadium, celebrating your league title while they're fighting for their lives in the top flight, that can definitely lead to some crazy fans taking measures.
Yeah, I can't imagine River doing that in the Bombonera.
Yeah. So look, it's unacceptable from Espanyol's standpoint, but with that being said, you cannot deny that Barcelona provoked it.
Xavi, prior to that game, they conceded 11 goals all season. The most Barcelona of Barcelona, where they've built them on defence. Ronald Araujo has probably been their player of the year, just fantastic. And it's really remarkable how he's done this, because Barcelona are so watertight at the back, and you have to give him tremendous credit when you think about what he took over from Koeman.
Yeah, overall, I think that, look, Barcelona, it's been a positive season for them. Yes, they haven't been able to progress in the Champions League, but the fact is they've been able to win their first league title in 4 years, their first in the post-Lionel Messi era. And so, yeah, I think that still a lot of room for improvement. I think that we thought that Xavi was going to come in and, institute a possession-based, attack-minded philosophy, but actually a lot of their games have been 1-0 wins, just barely eking it out, thanks to for my money, the player of the season for Barcelona, Marc-Andre Ter Stegen. He has been back to his best and is showing why he's one of the best goalkeepers in world football. Huge season for him. Huge season as well from a lot of key defenders, I would say. Alejandro Balde been a revelation at left back, overtaking Jordi Alba in the starting lineup. And another player who's phased out and eventually retired, Gerard Piqué. We saw Andreas Christensen and Ronald Araujo forming a promising center back duo. Of course, you got Jules Koundé making a positive impact from his arrival from Sevilla, and we also saw a lot of players such as Rafinha make an impact since arriving. So I think that for sure Barcelona need a lot of improvement in the final third. We did see Robert Lewandowski, although he is in pole position to win top scorer, his form has definitely taken a decline as of late. I think that that needs to be addressed, and I think that without Ousmane Dembele, with him being constantly injured, I do think that they are in need of perhaps more of a threat on the flanks to go alongside Rafinha if they do decide to keep hold of him. I know that they're in talks to sell Ferran Torres to Aston Villa, and remains to be seen what happens with Ansu Fati. But yeah, I think that they need to be targeting some midfield and attacking reinforcements. Obviously, Sergio Busquets will be leaving Camp Nou on a free transfer. So, it's been, I think, both a successful as well as a rebuilding year for Barca, getting a lot of these new signings into the team and phasing out players such as Piqué and Alba. So yeah, I think that one thing that Xavi has been able to do incredibly well is establish a rock solid back line. I believe the best defensive record in Europe's top 5 leagues, and I believe the best record for clean sheets. And as the saying goes, defense wins championships. So when you're able to eke out a lot of these narrow 1-0 wins, it definitely helps. And I think that in a way, I also think that Barcelona being knocked out of the Champions League and shortly after the Europa League helped in focusing their objective on domestic competition. So yeah, fantastic achievement from Xavi, and I do think that this was a much needed achievement for them as they look to rebuild themselves.
All right, my friend. Last question. PSV. Sorry, Feyenoord. Santiago Jimenez, Mexican striker. We talked about this earlier. Lots of clubs wanting the number 9. He's had a fantastic season. Arne Slot done a brilliant job since coming in from Dick Africa. Finished third in his first season. Got Feyenoord's Europa Conference final, and won the Eredivisie second season. And has some very very uh, exceptional players there that people would like to get their hands on. So tell me, are we looking at another exceptional Dutch coach, Arne Slot, who's only 44? And Santiago Jimenez, how highly do you rate him?
Yeah, I think so. I think first of all, I would say definitely check out my last week's episode of Zach Loby's European Football Show, where I chat to Thomas Rongden about Feyenoord and Santiago Jimenez, Feyenoord being one of his rival teams. And but I think that Jimenez, we talked about him a lot on the show. He's been a real sensation. I still can't believe he was not called up for Mexico's World Cup squad, but he's really, made Tata Martino eat crow, as they say, and really come into his own. One of the top scorers in the Netherlands, so technically gifted for a big man, and has really been able to emerge as that physical profile in attack. And yeah, Feyenoord. It's been a long time coming for them, winning their first league title in 6 years, ending Ajax's reign of dominance. But I think that one thing that they definitely share in common with Burnley and Napoli and Lens, they've been able to take that next step after losing so many key players. Napoli won their first league title in 33 years after losing the likes of Kalidou Koulibaly, Lorenzo Insigne, Dries Mertens. Feyenoord, they lost a treasure trove of players. So many key players, whether that's Frederick Arsenis, Tyrell Malacia, Marco Senesi to Bournemouth. So many vital players, and yet they were able to rebuild and with some fantastic recruitment, and yeah, dust themselves off after losing to Roma in the Europa Conference League final. So yeah, Arne Slot, he's done a fantastic job there. He did a great job at AZ Alkmaar to earn this position. Getting them to finish atop alongside alongside Ajax in the Eredivisie, and yeah, taking a well-deserved step up. So yeah, fantastic year for Feyenoord as well as Dutch clubs in general. But yeah, I do think that there's a chance that Arne Slot is going to be having a lot of interest from plenty of clubs this summer. But yeah, they have had a phenomenal window. And so, you mentioned Santiago Jimenez. He's been a delight up top, but so many other players worth mentioning. Igor Paixão, been a real fun Brazilian winger, just bags of ability and pace, who loves to get up the wing and has scored some absolute golazos as of late. Orkun Koçu, the captain, 22 years old, and has been one of the best
Yeah,
midfielders
really good.
in the Netherlands. And you also have Usama Idrissi, 27 years of age, and he had actually previously been playing for Sevilla. Was also playing for the likes of Ajax, and was playing alongside likes of Calvin Stengs and Teun Koopmeiners, and really broke through as part of that Oz team under Arne Slot. So has definitely enjoyed a resurgence in form in Rotterdam. So yeah, fantastic campaign for Feyenoord, and I think it just goes to show, even if you're in a position where you're going to be losing so many key players, you can still turn it around and have a rapid rebuild. We saw that with plenty of teams. We saw that with Benfica, of course, losing Darwin Nunez and getting in plenty of top players such as Frederick Arsenis. But yeah, Feyenoord, what they've been able to do is they've been able to just completely reinvigorate their team and get them to win the league title and get them back into the Champions League. Fantastic job by the recruitment staff as well as Arne Slot.
Completely agree, my friend. Folks, don't forget to give this guy a check. Check him out at Exactly Way at Breaking the Lines. Of course, at BTL, we'll be back tomorrow with Jonathan Johnson to find out what's everything's going on in France with PSG, and of course what's going on with Toulouse, Christophe Gaultier, and a few other things. So we'll see where Lionel Messi's going this summer. Mate, thank you as always. Take it easy, and thanks for downloading, folks, and thanks for listening. See ya.